You are listening to the Intelligent Racer Podcast, where we look to educate and entertain the endurance racing community through discussions with racing professionals and elite age groupers.
In today's episode, we speak with John Fegyveresi. He's one of 15 people to have finished the Barkley Marathons. We talk about Barkley, his recent race at the Western States 100, and other running topics. I hope you enjoy. John, welcome to the podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, thanks.
So why don't we start off with then just learn a little bit about your background. I was reading up on you, and I read that you started out in the endurance sports world doing some through hikes on the Appalachian Trail and the Pacific Crest Trail and things like that. I mean, how did those experiences ultimately lead you to ultra running and ultimately taking on some of the hardest races in the world?
Yeah, and that's exactly right. And I didn't do a whole lot when I was in college. And went through a couple years in my late 20s where I sort of had some rough stuff happen and I kind of needed to reset. So I had spent a weekend hiking in the Smokies with a friend, and I kind of reconnected just with the trails and decided I wanted to try something a little more bold. So I set my sights on doing the Appalachian Trail right before starting graduate school. And so kind of once I did that, it sort of set my path moving forward. And I really, really enjoyed that. Started grad school, and kind of the whole time I was there, I kept thinking about, like, when can I fit something else in? When can I squeeze something in? You know, I did some lab work in Colorado, and I squeezed in a through hike on the Colorado Trail while I was out there. And so I just kind of really, really fell in love with through hiking, squeezed in the Pacific Crest Trail sort of between graduate degrees. But then I don't know, at some point in there, I sort of realized while I was sitting around, you know, in my apartment between big adventures, that I wasn't doing a whole lot. So that's when I started kind of picking up on the running again. And obviously, since I had been doing so much running on hiking on trails, initially I was doing running on roads, but I very quickly gravitated over towards running on trails, and so that's kind of how I ended up doing some of the more long distance trails. And then I kind of, I did some traditional trails and such, traditional races, but I really found I enjoyed the more obscure sort of personal challenge style events over the more traditional, like 50-miler and 100-milers.
Right. And so you mentioned grad school. I mean, one thing, not to go too deep down this rabbit hole, but one thing that caught my eye, I was looking you up, and I saw you did a lecture at the Museum of the Earth in Ithaca, and I went to school at Cornell, so it kind of caught my eye, and I kind of saw that you've done some really interesting research and spent some time in Antarctica and stuff. So could you just talk like really quickly about like what it is you've researched and what you do for a living? Because I think it's really cool, and I just want to touch on it.
Right. So I'm actually talking to you now from Colorado, and I'm out here for 2 months working at the National Ice Core Lab, which is housed at the U.S. Geological Survey main campus here in Denver. So when I started grad school, I kind of knew I wanted to do geoscience, but I wasn't sure which discipline. I was kind of like traditional geology, but I wasn't very good at it. And so very quickly I started working with the Ice and Climate group, and fell in pretty quickly with them. And within my first year, I was on a project that my advisor had said, well, there's a field component, and we, if you want to do this project, you'll spend a field season for 2 months down in Antarctica. And I was like, yeah, sign me up. That sounds great.
Yeah.
So after that, I mean, it was pretty much consistent every year. I went 5 years in a row to the same field site where we were drilling one of the deepest ice cores ever drilled, actually the deepest ice core ever drilled by the U.S. program, and also one of the highest resolution. So it's really, really, it's turned out to be one of the best climate records that we've ever been able to receive from an ice core, particularly from the U.S. program. So I spent a lot of time. That was sort of my main component of my dissertation, was working on that ice core. But since then, since I finished grad school, now I'm on a new ice coring project where we actually drilled a core at South Pole. So I got to spend 2 seasons down actually at South Pole Station, which was great. And now I'm analyzing samples from that core, except now I'm no longer a student. I'm actually one of the lead investigators on the project. So it's kind of cool. I've been able to go through the whole, first year student through sort of advanced student, and now I'm one of the PIs on the project. So it's been a really cool process going through it all.
Yeah, very cool. And it gets you to go to the South Pole and Antarctica. It's a place that not many people get to go to. So that's really cool.
Yeah, I've definitely loved the field work component. I worked a job for 7 years before going back to grad school where I basically never left a cubicle. And so, it's like now that I get to do this job or this work, I still spend a lot of time, hacking away at computer code and, sitting at a desk, but knowing that there's a small component of my job now where I actually get to go out and do something in the field, whether it's in the field or like here, spend 2 months in Colorado in the lab, which is great. I get to go stand in a freezer and work on samples, but then on, every night or on weekends, I get to go play in the mountains of Colorado. So it's kind of nice, having a little bit of movement in my job. I definitely like that.
Yeah. And then when you were in Antarctica, did you have an opportunity to still train and run and stuff, or was the kind of weather preventing you from doing that?
It depended, it was an interesting experience. If I was at the main station, called McMurdo, it's actually not so bad there. And, that's kind of the main, there's like 1,000 people there, and there's actually some trails there you can run on. There's a pretty thriving running community. A lot of people that go down to Antarctica are sort of young, adventurous types. And so there's a lot of runners and trail runners and hikers and stuff. And when I would go out to my remote field camp, it's just flat. So there's not a whole lot of, there's no terrain. So basically I would just go out and I'd run, laps on the skiway that the plane lands on. So it was kind of boring, but, it got in miles. And then at South Pole, it was really cold. So it was difficult. But incidentally, the year I was there, I ran in the South Pole Marathon, which was kind of fun. They put on a marathon every year, and usually only like 1 or 2 people run it. So it was kind of fun doing that as well.
Very cool. And so switching gears here, I mean, speaking of climate, you just recently did the Western States 100, and obviously it started out with some snow and had 100-degree temperatures. So it's kind of a wide range of conditions. And, you got off the wait list right before the race. And so how did, talk about that a little bit? I mean, first of all, mentally not knowing if you're going to race or not, but then when you found out that you had to be ecstatic, but it's also sort of one of those things that, again, you weren't ready. You didn't actually know if you were going to race. So I'd imagine that had to be hard mentally.
It was, I'm still processing it all. It was an incredibly ridiculous roller coaster. In December when I signed up for the lottery and I saw that I didn't get in, I kind of was like, okay, another year, it's like 6 or 7 years now. But then they pulled for the wait list, which was new. And I saw I was 39th and I was like, dang, there's no way it'll go that deep. Maybe 30. And I was like, dang it. So I kind of made the decision then that I was like, well, I'll sign up for Bighorn because it's about the same time, a week earlier. And I'll kind of plan to do that. I know I'm going to be in Colorado then anyway, so I can go do Bighorn. So I was actually planning to probably do Bighorn. It was on the schedule. And then I really hit it hard all spring. I ran a lot of miles all spring. I was doing, for me, doing anything like 60 to 70 miles a week is a pretty high for me. I know like the elites do like 100 plus miles a week, but for me doing 60, 70 miles a week is a good week. So I was doing consistently, and I was running a lot of like local trail 50Ks and 50 milers and things like that in the Northeast. And so I was really trying to hit it hard. But the whole situation got really complicated when the wait list started moving really quickly in like April and May, and I wasn't sure what to do. And then about a week before Bighorn, it moved to the point where I was like 3 down, and I was like, well, if I run Bighorn, there's no way I can run Western States because it's 1 week before. I'll be totally wrecked.
Yeah.
And so I had this decision to make. Do I just forego Bighorn and hope that I get in and maybe not get into both of them, or do I run Bighorn and just kind of give up on it? So I actually made the decision to not run Bighorn and just eat the, $200 fee for Bighorn and just put all my hopes in Western. And then, as the days got closer, it dropped again. And then on the last day of the refunds for Western, one morning it dropped. So by the time I flew out to Squaw, I was number 1 on the wait list. And I had no idea. I was like, it's never been a wait list, so I didn't know if I even had a remote chance. And And then, the way it went down with, I mean, I don't know how much was publicly posted, but, the very short of it is that somebody came up to the registration table at the very end of registration and said, "I'm dropping." And they basically came up to me and said, "You're in, man, you got in, someone dropped." And they brought me in and I started filling out all this paperwork and they, getting ready to take my picture. And then the race director comes running and says, No, that was a mistake. He's already been accounted for. You're not in.
I did not hear
so
that.
I was like, I was so devastated. I was like, I can't believe I've made it so far that I've like literally filling out paperwork and then I got pulled. And then they're like, "Oh, and everyone checked in, so you're not going to run this year." And I was like, "Oh my God, I can't believe that just happened." But then like, as that was all unfolding, Gordy Ainsley, basically the father of the race, came around the corner and was like, "Hey, Craig, so I don't think I'm going to run this. I'm not feeling so well, and I might just go up the mountain and turn around." And that's when the race director was like, "Well, if you're not going to run, you should let this guy run because he's here, he flew here, and he's ready to go." And so, and of course I was like, "I can't take your bib. You're Gordy Ainsley." But he's like, "Nah, it's fine. Take it. It's fine." And so, yeah, it was like super emotional and everything. And then, I guess I was pretty well trained, but even still, I took it pretty easy. There was a lot of really bad snow up at the top. Now, I love snow, but what made it really tricky was there was a lot of like really delicate like snow bridges that people kept falling through, and it made it really kind of treacherous. Like you'd be cruising along and then just boom, you'd fall in up to your waist. And
oh wow.
And then there was probably like 3 or 4 miles of like really sloppy, like knee deep mud, and people were losing shoes, and it was just really bad. So I took it really slow through there, and then I got to a point where I knew I was kind of like hugging that 24-hour cutoff, and I just said, this is silly. I'm just gonna like enjoy myself. So and the heat was brutal in the canyons. It was like 105 degrees. So I took it really easy, but I enjoyed it. I enjoyed every minute of it. I just, savored it because I was like, it might be years before I get back on this course again. So
yeah.
I made the decision early to kind of just have some fun with it and not race too hard. And I think it was the right call. So.
Awesome. Yeah, no, that's a heck of a story. I didn't hear about the part where you thought you were in and it got pulled. I didn't know about that. So I'm like, wow.
And he felt bad. Like the race director was like, "I feel so bad that just happened." He's like, "Oh, I'm so sorry." And it was really cool too, because at the race meeting, he walks in and there's 500 people in this race meeting, and he goes, "I just watched the coolest thing happen." And then he tells the story, and I'm just standing there like, oh my gosh. So he basically told the entire room what happened, and everyone was like cheering. It was really cool.
Awesome.
So
very cool. So another race I wanted to hear a little bit about is, of course, Barkley. So, you're one of 15 finishers, and you obviously had success there, and you crewed John Kelly this year. I actually got to see John a couple weekends ago up at a triathlon, so we were catching up. But I would love to hear kind of what are some of the keys of success there. I mean, you had success, and then you crewed John. He had success, so you obviously know kind of some of the ingredients that would lead to success in that race. I would love to hear about it.
Yeah, I've had a lot of time to think about that. I remember doing a couple of podcasts like right after, back in 2012, and I was asked questions like that, and I had a hard time verbalizing how it was that I was able to do it. And I think first of all, there was a lot of things that just lined up right. A lot of luck definitely came my way, but there has to be an obsessive compulsive component about it. Like when I first found out about the race, I was like, oh, that sounds kind of quirky and cool, but I wasn't really like that into it. I was just like, oh, maybe I'll read about that or something. But then I bought, one of the original guys of the race has a book about it.
Yeah.
And I bought his book and I read the book, and it just was like, I couldn't put it down. And I started down this rabbit hole where I read the book, and then I started like pulling down race reports, and I was reading like all these like details about various finishers' race reports. And it was just like, it just sucked me in. And this was all like about 2 weeks before I deployed for Antarctica. So basically I just printed out all this material, grabbed the book, printed out a bunch of maps. I had like Frozen Head send me a bunch of maps from the park, and I brought it all down to Antarctica with me. And like, basically there's a lot of time when you're just sitting around down there. And I just, every night, like when the other people were just like playing cribbage or something, I would just like obsess over these maps, like to the point where I was learning every single like contour line in the park and like where every mountain was, where every like drainage was, and just trying to like visualize every part of the course. And like I'd look at someone's race report and be like, oh, they talked about going down this drainage from this, at this bearing from this peak, and I'd look at the map and be like, that must be right there, and like and I got so obsessed with it. And to the point where I was like, I want to see how far I can get with this thing if I get in. And, I didn't know if I'd even get in because it's so impossible to get into this thing. And when I sent in my application, I really didn't think I'd have a chance. But I don't know. I think maybe the combination of some of the stuff that I've done, but also the fact that when I applied, I told Laz that I was applying from Antarctica. I think he was kind of like, oh, I got to let you in now.
Yeah.
So I think that might have helped my application just because I was considered like, he probably thought, oh, you think Antarctica is extreme? Well, you should try my race, kind of. So that might have been part of the reason why I got in that first time. Although I honestly don't know. He never tells you like what he uses to like figure it out.
Right.
But then when I got back, I just set up this like insane training schedule where it was like really heavy on hill training and long runs. So I was doing like thousands and thousands of feet. I lived in central Pennsylvania, and there's like the Appalachian Ridge goes right through like basically my backyard. And Pennsylvania's notorious for like technical, rocky, pretty straight up and down climbs along the Appalachian Trail and along the ridge lines there. And so I just went to this local park that's about 10 miles away called Rothrock, and I would just do constant repeats up and down these huge climbs over and over and over and over again. And to the point where I was doing 10,000 feet a day. And then I was like trying to check off these boxes. I was like, well, I know I need some help with navigation. So I'm going to go do this mini through hike on like this trail I've never done before and purposely get myself lost so that I know how to like deal with panic and like how to get myself out of a lost situation. And, I kind of just like set up all these like situations. And then I practiced bushwhacking up like unmarked hillsides, and I practiced on gas line cuts, and yeah, I was doing, 30, 40,000 feet a week and just constant climbing. And I think that is a huge part of being successful is that even if mentally you like are committed, like you want it, like you have to be able to do like thousands of feet of climb. I mean, and I know this because in subsequent years when I've gone back, if I've done less climbing training, I know my legs are way more tired and I'm just not able to climb as well. So, you have to do that training, that just constant beating up hours and hours a week of climbing.
And what did your mileage look like per week? I mean, you mentioned 50 to 60 was a lot for you now, but what was it then?
I wasn't so much worried about tracking mileage, but I did. I mean, I guess I did. And I would say during peaks, I was doing around 100, a little over 100 maybe a week. But again, I was trying to mostly focus on ascent. Generally what I would do is I do like 3 days during the week of like shorter hill workouts. Like I do like 6,000 to 8,000 feet of climb with maybe like 8 to 10 miles or something each workout. But then on the weekend, there's this race in Pennsylvania called the Rothrock 30K, and it's a 30K, so it's like 18 miles, and it's got like 6,000 feet of gain, and it's just this technical, really gnarly, fun course. And I would just run that as a training run on both Saturday and Sunday. So I would do it back to back 2 days in a row. And it was like the perfect workout because there's these, 1,200 foot climbs that go straight up, straight down. Plus you get like a lot of running in there. And so it was just like a good combination workout. And then towards the end, I was just, I was doing these long, like mini through hikes. And I ran this trail called the Black Forest Trail, which is like 45-mile, notoriously gnarly course in Pennsylvania. I did that in one go, stuff like that, just to try and build up my mileage and my like wear and tear and see how well I could get beat up.
Yeah.
I guess.
And then when you were out there in 2012, did you spend a large amount of time on your own, or were you with a group of people through the earlier laps to kind of get, feel for the course? I know obviously up front, there were the two other finishers who worked together up until lap 5, of course. But
yeah,
how did it go for you?
Surprisingly, this was one of those situations I was telling you where like luck just kind of worked out because I was actually on my own a lot during the 5 loops, But, loop one is so critical because it's the first time you see most of the course.
Yeah.
There's a couple of places on the course that are technically on like park trails that you're allowed to see before the race, but a lot of it is off trail, so you go and scout it before. So it just happened to work out where like, the first tricky part, I was with a group that knew it. And then after that, they pulled away and I was alone for a long time, but I was on, part of the course that was pretty straightforward. And then the next time I hit like a little bit of a confusing spot, another guy caught up to me that knew it. So it just kind of worked out where I always happened to like bump into somebody on that first loop when I needed help. And then, but I also had a really good mental picture of what I was expecting. So I did really well most of the loop on and off, some of it alone, but a lot of it with like different people. But then at the end of the loop, there's this notorious section called the beach fork where you've climbed up out of the prison and then you have to go down this really kind of technical drainage way down like 1,600 feet and then way up. And I've obviously never seen that. And I was really nervous about it. It's always like, people always talk about that. It's like really, really easy to get turned around in there. And right as I started that descent, Nick Holland caught up to me, who had run it the year before. And he's like, just follow me. I know where I'm going. So it just
awesome.
kind of worked out that way.
Yeah.
And then after I saw it once, I have a pretty good memory of like little things like that. So then as soon as I started loop two, I was like, I kind of had it dialed in. I knew where stuff was. And then, any place that I had a little question mark, I like rechecked it on loop two. And then from that point on, I was pretty, I only ever got lost like once or twice, and it was pretty mild after that.
Right. And did the sleep deprivation become an issue for you, or were you able to manage that okay?
Surprisingly, it wasn't that bad, which is weird because, I've done Vol State now twice, and I had a really hard time with sleep deprivation during that event.
Yeah.
Like I was falling asleep standing up. I had to take these crazy crash naps on the side of the road. But I don't know what it was about that particular year at Barkley. I just like so focused that I was able to like fight it off. But I will say there was a couple points. I remember on the beginning of loop 4, I was with Nick and Alan, and we were all so tired that we were all really cranky and we were kind of arguing with each other. And it was just kind of, we just were like, just trying to work together, but we were also so tired that we were kind of making it worse. And so we ended up separating a little bit, and it worked out really well because we kind of cooled off. And then when we did get back together, it was great. And then at the very end of the last loop, as I was climbing the last major climb, I started hallucinating really bad. That was it was so close to the end at that point that I was like, oh, this is cool. Wow, I've never hallucinated. This is great.
Yeah.
I was kind of embracing it. So.
Cool. And you mentioned Vol State, so that's another Laz race, right? So that's 500K across the state of Tennessee. I mean, did you do that after Barkley, and then is that how you found out about it, or what was the...
actually, exactly. So I went back the next year to Barkley, right the year after I finished, and I was actually more trained. I really thought I'd be able to give it another go, and that year we had really bad fog, and that was one bad night in the fog, and I lost so much time that I just couldn't recover. But I happened to do a lot of that second year with Alan Abbs, and he was like, hey, I'm running Vol State this year. Have you thought about doing that? And I was like, I hadn't thought about it, but now you've kind of piqued my curiosity. So I ended up looking into it and signing up. And even though it's pavement, if you do it unsupported, it kind of has this sort of mini through hike feel to it. You have to sort of plan what gas stations you want to go to and where you want to fuel up. And if you want to sleep, just on a bench on the side of the road, or if you want to go to a motel. And so I don't know, I just thought that was really fun to kind of just wing it.
Yeah.
And it ended up being a blast the first time I did it, because it was kind of a sort of a cooler year, and it was new. And then I did it a second time, and it just wasn't as good because I basically went the same exact pace. And so like everything was the same. The nights came at the same time. Every like milestone came. It was kind of like, oh, I've already done this. Like, I don't know. It wasn't as satisfying that second time. So.
Right. And are there, what do the cutoffs look like for that? Is it, generous, or is it, I mean, obviously Barkley's on the extreme end, but this is
generous.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's sort of tailored for anyone to be able to do it. And I think you can average, it's 10 days. So you can average basically a 50K a day and still finish.
Oh, okay.
So you could essentially walk the whole thing if you want. You just have to do 31 miles a day. So, I mean, the lead guys do it in like 3 days. Like the lead runners that are supported, the course record unsupported is like right at 4 days. It was a guy named Johan, who's run Barkley. Actually, he's done really well at Barkley too. And then I did it in like 4.5. So I was running a lot of it for the first couple of days, and then I slowed down a bit on the last couple of days. But I definitely ran a lot of it.
Very cool. And so one more race I wanted to touch on. You've done a lot of cool things and a lot of races that I was interested in hearing about. But one in particular, I grew up in New Jersey, and I saw you did a 72-hour race there. I mean, how did that go?
Yeah.
I mean, mentally, that has to be tough to do a timed race for that long. I mean, just talk about that a little bit. It caught my eye.
That's a great event. So again, that was like a really whimsical decision to sign up for that. Like I was sitting in a cafe one day, and this was right after I'd come back from failing at Barkley my second year, and I was kind of really down, and I was, annoyed at how it all went down. And I just was like, I want to try something that I would never do. Like what's a race that I would never do? I want to try something like that just to see like what's out there. And I found this, 3 days at the fair, and I was like, running a mile loop for 72 hours on pavement. That sounds awful. Like, oh my God, I want to do that. I just want to see how like crazy it is. And it ended up being so much fun because you just get so like invested in the people, because you're never more than a mile away from the same people. And there's an aid station at the start. So it's like every mile you can stop and just like fill up, and, you pitch your tent, you can sleep whenever you want. And it ended up being so much fun. And it's just, like, I hadn't barely ever done timed events. So it was kind of neat, like trying to figure out like how many miles I want to do this day. And I've done it 4 times now. I've enjoyed it so much. And yeah, I've become really good friends with a lot of the New Jersey trail running community. And it's one of the few events that I really look forward to going back to every year. So
very cool. And they have different times, right? It's like they have a 24, 48, 72, probably a 12,
exactly.
a 6. Yeah.
Yeah. And actually this year they had a 6-day. They had the first year of a 6-day event. I did not do the 6-day. In fact, this year this was the first year I didn't do the 72-hour event. I kind of wanted to take a break from the 3 days. So this year, they have this weird event called the Quad, where you run every day, but you run a marathon each day instead of running continuous for 72 hours. But yeah, it's surprisingly fun, even though it would seem like on paper it would be really miserable. I have a lot of fun doing it.
Cool. So we're almost out of time. So I guess one final question would be, what's next for you, and what's on your bucket list? You've done some of the hardest races, in North America. I mean, do you have other things you're looking forward to? I did see on Ultra Sign Up, you're going to do another Laz race, I think this year, his backyard. Yeah. That one's quite interesting. I'm going to give that a
try. I'm just going to go to that kind of with the idea of just having as much fun as possible. There's some really, really good guys running that, so I'm kind of like, okay, I know it's going to be tough. Definitely have Hard Rock on my radar. I've been trying to get into that race for about 7 years now, and every year my odds go up. So I really hope next year is the year I can finally run that. And then I don't know, there's still a part of me that I really love the thru hiking, and I wish I had time to do like the Continental Divide Trail or something, but that would take 4 or 5 months. Maybe a race in Europe at some point. I tried to run Spartathlon one year, but I'm was on the wait list, and I'd love to maybe look at UTMB one year.
Cool.
Still thinking about what's out there, but definitely want to maybe try an FKT or something. I've always been kind of attracted to that idea. Just see if I could even try and attack something like that, but I don't know.
Cool. Well, I'll definitely be tracking the results of the backyard race, because I think the format is genius. So it really is interesting. So, best of luck with that. Cool. And, in your future adventures and stuff. But, John, thank you so much for your time today.
Yeah. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks for listening to the Intelligent Racer podcast. For more information on this and other episodes, please visit www.intelligentracer.com. Also, be sure to check us out on social media, and please review us on your podcast directory. Join us next time for another edition of the Intelligent Racer.